suddenly became very busy.
It is. It's expected.
Yeah.
But it is more or less the same number. A lot of people they come from the and especially now for the opening day. No.
Good morning, distinguished delegations. We are invited to take your seats so that we can commence the opening. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to welcome you all to the meeting of the 25th IRENA Council. My name is Álvaro Seriani. I am the Ambassador of Uruguay to the UAE and permanent representative to IRENA and chair of the 24th meeting of the IRENA Council. Under item 1 of the provisional agenda of this meeting, I declare open the 25th meeting of the Council of the International Renewable Energy Agency. I would like now to address the Council. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for Uruguay to address the 25th meeting of the Council. During our chairmanship, we witnessed strong engagement and participation at the Council meetings in 2022 from Council members and alternates, as well as the wider IRENA membership. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Norway as Vice Chair, represented by His Excellency Mr. Sten Arne Rosnes, for supporting the deliberations of the Council meetings in 2022. Dear members, through our open and constructive discussions and rich exchanges, we came together to outline our forward-looking vision for IRENA and the work undertaken by the agency, culminating in important documents including the medium-term strategy for 2023-2027, which outlines the strategic direction of the agency over the next 5 years. Last year, also under the same chairmanship, we adopted the renewal of the mandate of the Director General in recognition to the strong work and good performance during his first period. Together, our commitment to strengthening the role and work of the agency, including by highlighting our unique circumstances as well as shared endeavors, empowers IRENA to move forward in mobilizing urgent and targeted action, unparalleled international cooperation and continuous innovation, taking the leading role in accelerating the renewables-based energy transition across countries, regions, and the world. This would not be possible without each and every one of us and our commitment to the mission of the agency. With regard to Uruguay's commitment to strengthening our renewables-based energy transition, we are proud to inform that the country is advancing in the second stage of the energy transformation that includes, among other challenges, the decarbonization of the energy sector, that means industry and transportation, as well as the development of green hydrogen for both the local market and for export. The country has taken an important step towards the development of green hydrogen with the conclusion last week of the first pilot project. The H2 project will seek to continue advancing in the energy transition in Uruguay and will bet on the development and production of green hydrogen in different dimensions and productive areas. The first area to be addressed will be the transport of heavy cargo. The initiative will promote the development of regulations and knowledge, which will then allow the technology to be scaled up to other activities at the national level, generating experience and inputs for the development of public policies focused on sustainable development. Uruguay is committed to renewable energy and to the work of IRENA. Therefore, we will continue to actively collaborate with the agency. This close collaboration was reflected during the successful visit of the Director General of IRENA, Francesco La Camera, and his team to Uruguay in March of this year. During this visit, Uruguay and IRENA launched the first investment forum for Latin America and the Caribbean of IRENA, which will take place this November in Uruguay with the aim of facilitating financing and accelerating the growth of renewable energy in the region. Simultaneously to the investment forum, and as officially confirmed last week, the Energy Week of the Latin American Energy Organization, OLADE, will be held in Uruguay. Both events will take place in the week of November 6 to 10 of this year in Montevideo, thus putting the country on the map of the global energy transition. You are all welcome to Uruguay. In closing, we remain committed to strengthening our engagement with IRENA, including through the governing body meetings and collaborative frameworks, as well as in the substantive work of the agency. Together, we will work with IRENA and the membership to turn our shared vision of a future powered by renewables a reality. Thank you. So this concludes the consideration of item 1 of the provisional agenda. Agenda item 2, organization of work, election of officials. I now invite the Council to turn to item 2 of the provisional agenda. We will take up item 2A, election of officials. According to Rule 15 of the Rules of Procedure of the Council shall elect a chair and a vice chair from among its membership, with due regard to equitable geographical representation. The Council will recall that the Secretariat circulated on 18th May a communication on behalf of Uruguay and Norway as outgoing Council Chair and Vice Chair to confirm the designation of Antigua and Barbuda as Chair and the United States of America as Vice Chair. Do I take that the Council wishes to elect Antigua and Barbuda as Chair and the United States of America as Vice Chair of the 25th meeting of the Council? I hear no objection. It is so decided. It is my pleasure to declare Antigua and Barbuda, represented by Mr. Tumasi Blair, Deputy Permanent Representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations, as Chair, and the United States of America, represented by Mr. Joel Hansen, Senior Energy Officer at the United States Department of State, as Vice Chair of the 25th meeting of the IRENA Council. I would like to extend my best wishes to Antigua and Barbuda and the United States of America. I am confident that under their stewardship, the outcomes from the Council, the deliberations will reach greater heights. Let me now hand over to the incoming chair. Please, Mr. Blair.
Good morning. I would like to thank Uruguay, His Excellency Mr. Alvaro Ciani, Chair of the 24th Council. Before I address the Council, I would like to turn to the appointment of the Rapporteur. Rule 18 of the Rules of Procedure requires that the Chair proposes to a member of the Council to act as Rapporteur. I would like to inform the Council that I have proposed to Tonga to act as Rapporteur, and I am pleased that Tonga has accepted this responsibility. Do I take it that the Council agrees with this proposal? I hear no objection. So decided. It is my pleasure to declare Tonga, represented by His Excellency Mr. Honorable Akula, Rapporteur for the 25th meeting of the Council. I would like to thank Tonga for accepting this position, and I'm looking forward to working with them in finalizing the report of this meeting. Now that I have the full Bureau of the 25th meeting of the Council is elected, I would like to say a few words to give some context to our meeting today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the chairmanship of the 25th meeting of the IRENA Council is a privilege for Antigua and Barbuda. On my behalf of my government, I would like to express our commitment in guiding the work and discussions of this Council related to the implementation of the Current Work Programme and the preliminary framework for the next biennium, as well as addressing important administrative and institutional issues with the aim of supporting IRENA's mission and achieving our common goal. Global events in recent times have worsened the challenges faced by many nations, including small island developing states like Antigua and Barbuda. These challenges have slowed progress towards universal energy access and have negatively impacted investment flows to promote and deploy renewable energy. Unfortunately, these challenges have disproportionate impact on vulnerable economies and communities. To tackle these challenges, it is crucial for all of us to work together and take concerted efforts and action. We must find ways to further engage and ensure the active participation and inclusion of small island developing states in shaping the global energy transition, as well as other developing and vulnerable economies, including the least developed countries. Our focus should be on achieving tangible outcomes, such as increasing financing and investments in renewable energy to develop a clean energy system that will ensure improved lives and livelihood for all, while leaving no one behind. These initiatives must especially be tailored for the economies of SIDS, for whom the climate crisis presents a looming existential threat. We have an opportunity to make this possible as we are 1 year away from the 4th UN International Conference on Small Island Developing States, hosted by Antigua and Barbuda in 2024. To accomplish this, we must foster and accelerate a profound shift that prioritizes renewables at the core of our climate action. We are quickly approaching the important discussions at COP28 in the United Arab Emirates later this year, in which we will take stock of global progress on our climate and development imperatives. In this regard, the IRENA governing body meetings present us with the perfect opportunity to periodically assess, accelerate, and realign our course of action to ensure that we remain at the 1.5-degree pathway. Indeed, this convergence of events in IRENA's host country, the UAE, is a tremendous opportunity. Let us seize this opportunity to drive transformative change and safeguard the future of our planet and our people. By doing so, we can ensure a sustainable and prosperous future for all. It is now my pleasure to invite the Director General of IRENA, Mr. Francesco Lecamera, for his welcome remarks. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of welcoming you to the 25th meeting of the Council to our host city of Abu Dhabi. Together we have 335 delegates representing 113 members participating in this Council meeting. It is a testament to IRENA's inclusive processes and the timelessness of our mission that so many members participate in Council meetings. At the outset, let me express sincere gratitude to Uruguay and to my close friend, Mr. Alvaro Seriani, Ambassador to the United Arab Emirates and Permanent Representative, and Norway, represented by His Excellencies, my friends still, Mr. Sten Hard Roses, Ambassador to the United Arab Emirates and Permanent Representative for your work and continuous leadership last year. I warmly welcome Antigua Barbuda and you, represented by His Excellencies Ms. Tumais Blair, Deputy Permanent Representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the UN, and the United States of America, represented by Mr. Joel Hansen, Senior Engineering Officer, Department of State, for taking up the role of Chair and Vice Chair, respectively. We look forward to working closely with you in the coming days and beyond. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have a full agenda that will take us across sectors and geographies of the energy transition and examining important programmatic and institutional topics. But let me share with you a few thoughts as we connect here in the UAE, which we lost COP28. And one of the most consequential discussions since Paris. In December, the result of the global stocktake will tell us whether we are on track with the implementation of the Paris Agreement. The latest IPCC assessment and messages in preparation for the global stocktake were clear that the possibility of staying on a 1.5-degree pathway is slipping away. We understand fully what this means for all of us, but especially for the most vulnerable. Many are already experiencing the impacts of climate change, and the news of climate-related floods, drought, and fires is widespread and common. It is essential that COP28 not only concludes that we are not on track, but also offers a strategy on how to move forward. A renewable-based energy transition is a key pillar of such a strategy. IRENA's World Energy Transition Outlook shows that electrification and efficiency, fueled by renewables, clean hydrogen, and sustainable biomass, is the most realistic pathway to keep us on the 1.5 degrees. And most of the credible scenarios are in line with this direction. And the World Energy Transition Outlook has been tracking the development across the globe for several years now, So let me share a new findings from this year's analysis. First, renewables continue to dominate the new capacity. In March, we released the 2022 numbers that showed a new record in global addition, just shy of 300 gigawatts. IRENA's finance landscape also shows record investment in renewable, reaching almost $500 billion of US dollar. And the total investment in the energy transition also increased to 1.5 trillion of US dollar. But this is where the good news stops. Deployment levels need to triple to an average 1,000 gigawatts with corresponding investment in all aspects of the energy transition. Cumulative investment between now and 2030 need to total 44 trillion of US dollar, with energy transition technologies representing 80% of the investment, or 35 trillion of US dollar. Current plan until 2030 amount 29 trillion of US dollar. So additional investment of 15 trillion US dollar will be needed until 2030. We also emphasize that a change in the volume and type of investment is required to set the stage for a dramatic decrease in the fossil fuel share by 2050. Further concern is that deployment is concentrated in only a few countries and limited to a couple of technologies, largely in the power sector. And this has been the trend for the past decade. IRENA's recent report on finance shows that 80% of investment in renewables benefit only 50% of the global population, leaving out countries that have massive access needs and strive for better lives and livelihoods. This reality must change. We need to take a hard look at why we are not moving faster and why more countries are not part of the renewable revolution. It is clear that we don't have the luxury of time to develop a clean energy system in the way the fossil fuel-based system evolved over the past 150 years. We need to use the energy transition as a tool to shape a more equal and inclusive world proactively. This means overcoming the physical barrier and building infrastructure that the new system requires, and that includes those who have been left behind until now. We need to invest massively in grids and routes on land and sea, and proactively account for new production locations, different patterns of trade, and demand center. This needs to be accompanied by an evolved policy and regulatory architecture that account for changing dynamics and move investment in the right direction. Finally, there needs to be a strategic shift in institutional capacity so that skills and capabilities are aligned with the system we are trying to create. We need to deliver on the promise to leave no one behind and ensure a climate-safe life for current and future generations. As the international community, we have the tools and means to do it. But we also need to have a critical look as to whether we are fit to deliver on what is required. It is my hope that our discussion today and tomorrow will bring new insight and ideas on how we can make this year matter and make it a turning point in the global energy transition. Thank you very much, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the Director General for his remarks. I now invite the Vice Chair, Mr. Hansen, to share his reflections with us. Mr. Hansen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the previous Chair and Vice Chair, and really, just to repeat, Chair, we thank you for taking on this role, a deep appreciation for you providing your service today. The United States is pleased to serve as Vice Chair, and we consider it an important charge as all members work together to bring greater urgency to the energy transition and keep IRENA at the center of this great effort. We will work to make these proceedings smooth and as participatory as possible. We are at your service, so please don't hesitate to approach us with any concerns. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. The Vice Chair and I would like to thank you all for the trust you have placed upon us, and I'm looking forward to our collaboration during the session. This concludes the consideration of item 2A of the provisional agenda. I now invite the Council to turn to item 2B of the provisional agenda, adoption of the agenda. The provisional agenda is contained in document C/25/L.1. The provisional agenda for the coming 2 days contains a number of programmatic, policy, and institutional discussions which are of direct relevance to the ongoing work of the agency and for its work program in the next biennium. Do I take it that the Council wishes to adopt the agenda for its 25th meeting as set out in document C/25/L.1? Bearing in mind the change of the title of agenda item 3 to On the Road to COP28, Renewables-Based Energy Transition and Critical Materials. I hear no objection. So decided. I would like to remind delegations that our meeting today is expected to end at 6 p.m. Abu Dhabi time. However, we may extend as needed for 30 minutes more. We have interesting discussions ahead of us. The Vice Chair and I are determined to make the most of the Council's time and to facilitate engaging discussions on all matters contained in the agenda for this meeting. Before we take up the rest of the agenda items, I would also like to inform members that simultaneous interpretation into the 6 official languages is provided. This concludes the consideration of item 2B of the agenda. I now invite the Council to turn to agenda item 3, On the Road to COP28, Renewables-Based Energy Transitions and Critical Materials. The Council has before it a background note with the same title contained in C/25/BN/4. This is a panel discussion where the Council will hear highlights from the Secretariat on the upcoming report on the geopolitics of critical materials. The panel will then consider different aspects of the topic as the global focus on the renewables-based energy transitions intensifies in preparations of COP28, after which the floor will be open for interventions. I would like to invite panel members to join me at the podium. Her Excellency, Ms. Ana Fanatora Gouveia, Secretary of State for Energy and Climate, Ministry of Environment and Climate Action of Portugal. Her Excellency, Ms. Gloria Magamobo, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy and Power and Development of Zimbabwe. Mr. Angus Tajuwanhana, Minister Advisor on Acceleration of Industrial Development in Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia. And I would now invite the Director General to introduce the topic. Director General, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce this discussion on energy transition and critical materials. In my opening remarks, I reflected on the importance of this year for all of us, as the global focus on renewable-based energy transition intensifies in preparation for COP28. Again, we are not on track with the implementation of the Paris Agreement. The global stocktake will underline this reality. But it is equally important to get a sense on how to tackle the barriers, anticipate challenges, and harness opportunities. And our discussion today is about all of this. The topic of critical materials has found its way to the top of the policy agenda in numerous countries for very good reasons. The energy transition will be metal and material intensive. The share of renewables needs to increase to at least 65% by 2030, from some 32% today. And electrifying end use, especially in transport, with the rapid growth of electric mobility, will add to the mineral market pressure. IRENA expects the technical evolution of critical materials to be shaped by three shifting and overlapping dynamics. The first dynamic, most dominant in the short to mid-term, would be marked by physical constraints and challenges to keeping up with a rising demand for certain materials. The second dynamic, already happening at scale, will bring disruptive innovation, where new ideas and experiments for material reduction and substitution will achieve wide commercialization. The third dynamic, still emerging today, will usher in a bigger role for circular economy, including more advanced and widely adopted method of reducing, reusing, and recycling critical materials. These dynamics present new opportunities for the diversification of the supply chains. Energy-related materials are not rare. We therefore do not expect the global scarcity of any mineral will put hard limit on the transition. But it's clear that we need to increase and diversify the extraction and processing to meet the growing needs. Developed countries account for the majority of global production necessary for the energy transition. But their share in production today is much smaller than in reserves. They can, however, leverage their mineral wealth to clean up the value chain and attract both midstream processing and downstream, for example, battery and EV manufacturing industries. We are already seeing some examples of countries who are taking such an holistic approach, and we look forward to hearing today the insight and experiences from different parts of the world. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with IRENA's new analysis, we turn the geopolitical focus to a topic that is about the future. At the same time, also very much about the past. The rush for raw minerals and metals is not a new phenomenon. Whether called gold or any other extractive commodity from human history, we have in many ways seen the story unravel before. Mining has also all too often played out as a tale of extreme. On the one hand, newfound comfort and prosperity, and on the other hand, a legacy of poor labor records, displacement, polluted waterways, and degraded land in the community where mines operate. A renewable-based energy transition provides a chance to rewrite the script for extractive commodities and ensure their value chains are more inclusive, ethical, and sustainable. I will now pass the floor to Elizabeth Press to share some of the insights from the upcoming report that look at all these issues. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Director General, and good morning. It's a pleasure to give you a preview of our upcoming report on the geopolitics of critical materials. For those of you who worked with us for a longer time, you know that we have this stream of work since 2019, when the Global Commission issued the report titled A New World. Since we had a deep dive on hydrogen released last year, and now we are planning to release the analysis on critical materials in July. So we had to make a very careful choice of how to give you enough information to show you what's in the report, but also not to reveal all about it. So we're going to try to do our best to share some insights. So the report is rooted in our analysis, in the veto, in how we see energy transition advancing. And just to give you a snapshot of how we see the shift in the primary energy supply, basically it's on its head between 2020 and 2015, the reversal of percentages between renewables and other fuels. So with that backdrop, our teams, we looked at, oftentimes when discussions are held around critical materials, it's used interchangeables. The policy concern is like a replacement of one dependency for another. But the fossil fuels and critical materials are fundamentally different. And here we highlight a few things just to kind of provide a snapshot of what it is. First, the rents. This is a 2021 statistics where critical materials amount to about 96 billion, whereas fossil fuels are around 2 trillion. The mining quantities, you see the difference, the dramatic difference between the two. And the use side of it is probably the most important in this conversation, because we are talking about totally different commodities. One is used as an input in manufacturing, the other one is burned, which by extension also has a very different dynamics around supply disruptions, because the critical material potential disruptions are related to energy transition and the potential to delay the acceleration of a transition, whereas fossil fuel disruptions at a daily basis impact on economies and households. And finally, as the Director General highlighted, the potential for recycling, reuse and recycling is something that is already being discussed and considered in the development of value chain, which obviously is not happening in fossil fuels. And so just to give you a visual on the market size for some of the energy-related commodities, it's absolutely not comparable with the exception of copper in the markets, the most valuable metal in terms of market size. The other minerals and metals are really a lot smaller. And it's clear that the sector will grow. So we looked at what will happen in the short term, because really we try to look at next 10 years most intensely, because anything beyond that is hard to predict with innovation and the dynamism in the energy sector. So we looked at the range of scenarios and also the range of chemistries and tried to see what is potentially the demand, how that will increase, and you can see the ranges that we see for selected materials. And then the next thing that we looked at was to see by 2030 what is the potential for scarcity in the energy transition. And so just to explain how we did this, we looked at the current mining, what exists, and the current demand, and then based on the assessments of growth and the different scenarios, we took an average of that and estimated the scarcity of different materials. So you can see the platinum, for instance, has a very low potential for scarcity by 2030, whereas lithium is on the other side of the spectrum. So We then looked at what are the greatest potential risks for next 5 to 10 years. So no country is self-sufficient in every raw material. And so interruptions in supply can affect virtually all countries. So even if countries are not importing raw materials, they might be dependent on parts or full products in the value chain. So we looked at the 6 supply risks. They are most often, they're not exhaustive, but they're most widely discussed geopolitical risks to supply in the short to medium terms, like 5 to 10 years. And especially for countries, they're highly import reliant. So I'll just give you a few examples to illustrate what we looked at here. So external shocks. For instance, during COVID, Peru closed its mines for over 3 months in 2020, and that disrupted about 12% of global copper supply. Then on export restrictions, we are seeing this increase. There really is a spike in export restriction in the last couple of years, and it's really becoming a high concern. About 10% of the global value of export of critical raw materials have faced at least one export restriction in recent years. Then there is this expression of resource nationalism, which is not necessarily negative, but it's sort of like inward-orientated considerations of critical materials production, and they also have external impact. For instance, in mid-2022, the DRC's Tenke Fugurame mine was halted for months due to royalty payment dispute with the company disputing 15% of a global cobalt supply. Then we discussed mineral cartels, and generally we do not find this to be a threat because for a number of reasons, including that the potential for diversification is really, really large, and also that the mines are owned by private companies and commodity traders, so the conditions for creation of cartels is actually not favorable. The other risk is the political and social instability. And an example is in 2014, a labor strike in South Africa's platinum mines lasted for 5 months and led to a 40% decline in global platinum production. And finally, market manipulation. As we saw, these markets are very small, and they're still. I mean, lithium. The first public trade of lithium started in 2021 in the London Metals Exchange, and then what we saw in March 2022, the surge in prices of nickel over 250% in 2 days due to a short squeeze caused by traders buying back positions at high prices. So, as in previous geopolitical analysis, we also looked at different aspects of human security, and we go through different aspects of social, economic, labor, and climate issues. But here I just selected one slide to give you a little bit of a flavor of one of the important aspects that we look at. And that's about water risks. The extractive industry has contributed to human insecurity in the past, and there are concerns that this rush for additional minerals will worsen this trend. In certain cases, mining critical materials such as copper, lithium, nickel, and cobalt has caused serious harm to workers, indigenous communities, and the environment. So this cross-cutting issue of water is the mining, overall the water usage is not that big, but it's often placed in the communities, in the areas, they are water scarce, and as ore quality degrades, you need more and more water for processing. So both quality and quantity of available water can deteriorate over time. About half of global copper and lithium production, for example, is concentrated in areas with high water stress. This includes the Lithium Triangle region connecting Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, and where the 65% of current lithium reserves are located. We flag these issues so that policymakers can really proactively look at some of these issues. They're not immediately visible as they consider their advancement. And then on the other side is how this can impact the development, and as the Director General mentioned at the beginning, many mineral-rich countries are in developing countries. And so we see that the energy transition presents the opportunity to attract new investment flows if properly managed. They can kickstart not only the raw material production, but also capture value. And here you see the example of the estimated value of battery minerals, electric vehicles along the value chain. So just to give you an example of what we see today, for instance, the mining of nickel, lithium, and cobalt represents only 0.6% in the total value chain of electric vehicles. So if you stay with that part, it's really the lowest, the most minimal part of a value chain that a country can retain. And here, international cooperation is key. Because the developing countries require infrastructure, technical expertise, and access to other production factors such as workforce with specialized skills and affordable power. And finally, we look at the range of strategies to reduce risks and open up new opportunities, where we look at how to mitigate supply chain vulnerabilities, increase domestic benefits, promote responsible, sustainable, and transparent mineral supply chains within the context of sustainable development. With this, I will stop and hand back to the Director General. Thank you very much.
I thank the Director General and Ms. Press for their remarks and presentations. Let me now hand over to Mr. Nazir El Tibi, Senior Producer and Presenter at Al Arabia and moderator of this panel. Mr. El Tibi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be with you here today and to moderate the esteemed panelists. I believe the Director General in his speech and later Ms. Elizabeth Press in her presentation have concisely and effectively set the scene for our topic of discussion, which will allow us to delve right into it. And I will want to start with Her Excellency Ms. Magombo. To what extent do you think that renewables are less prone to geopolitical shocks, to energy security risks compared to fossil fuels?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to participate in this distinguished panel. For us as Africa, we are still struggling with issues of access to modern energy. And when we talk to issues of renewables and their susceptibility to geopolitics, we are looking at the natural resources which we have as countries. If you look at Zimbabwe as a special case, we are looking at over 300 days of sunshine being available. We are looking at some hydro reserves along some of our perennial rivers. We are also looking at potential sites for wind, which can be local sites. Whilst if you look at most fossil fuels, apart from coal, which we do have, and we are able to also produce thermal power from our coal, most of the fossil fuels we use as a country, especially liquid fuels, are imported. So in the case where you have geopolitical issues, wars, you find that the country can be totally destabilized and brought to a standstill. So we believe that investments in renewables is key to ensure energy security. Whilst we acknowledge the fact that, yes, we'll still need to import certain energy products. And as a country, we're also looking at increasing access. And one of the fastest ways we can increase access from the current around 60% and cover the 40% of the non-served population is through distributed renewable energy systems.
And we're talking here about access to electricity.
Access to electricity as a modern energy form. And we believe that when we use distributed energy systems, we can accelerate that access and meet the universal access target we have for 2030. So we believe that with renewables, we reduce the risks of energy insecurity from external forces using our own resources. Although one of the critical issues for us as Zimbabwe is that most of the renewable energy technologies are imported technologies, which still gives us a risk because we still have to get these technologies from external parties. And as Zimbabweans and as a continent in general, we are looking at how do we decentralize production processes to ensure that any future supply disruptions caused by either pandemics or wars do not affect us as countries by ensuring that some of the production capacity of such renewable technologies can be done within our continent and within our countries.
And whether this is an individual effort or maybe it should be more of a global international effort to secure these supply chains of materials. I would like to ask you, Mr. Jahajana, given that the renewable energy transition will have a huge dependency on these critical minerals and metals, would the transition do away with energy-related geopolitical tensions in your perspective? Or will it merely just substitute one set of risks and one set of countries for another?
Good morning. Thank you. Yes, for Indonesia, climate change is already of government as well as common people concern. We already witnessed impact to weather change in the country, particularly the increasing of temperatures during the dry season. For instance, in 3 p.m. during this day, temperature in Jakarta can approach to 33 degrees Celsius. When I'm still a boy, it won't happen. Indonesia is import oil fossil, with the number is bigger and bigger year by year. So renewable energy bring benefit, of course, to the country. The thing that we have to take care is how we reduce and retire the current coal generation power plant that currently is dominated, the power generation. So the government will take several actions, retire those power plants which their lifetimes are almost come to end. And then promote modification system or enhancement of the power generation which still have longer end in its lifetime. And then we accelerate the development of green energy such as solar, wind, geothermal, etc. And the last is build smart grid to make all our renewable energy spreading all over the country can be utilized so we can balance the source of green energy and also the demand in the high populations area. So I believe that geopolitically, if we can manage it in a good way and very carefully, we do that, we can do it, Indonesia can do it. Thank you.
Ms. Goevia, why has the issue of access to critical materials, as if just overnight, become a pressing strategic issue for energy security, definitely for climate security, despite having academic literature, at least over a decade ago, pointing to the importance of critical materials? Why has this issue now risen to the top of the policy agenda?
Good morning. Thank you very much for your question. Let me salute the Director General of IRENA. It's a pleasure to be here with you, my fellow panel members, and the distinguished guests. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. Your question provides the answer in itself, so it makes it easier for me. Well, I think there are three main reasons why we now have the focus on critical raw materials and on their importance for us to move forward. The very first one is, of course, that well, I'm from Portugal. If you allow me also to talk about the European Union experience. The first reason is, of course, that energy transition, climate transition has accelerated in the past year. This is a reality. This is a reality in policy actions, and this is a reality in results. And therefore, if you want to have a climate transition, you need to look carefully at critical raw materials and the framework that you provide for the development of those value chains. So this is the very first reason, the acceleration of the climate transition, that of course was already a reality, but that is now proceeding at a much faster pace, and several countries are doing it at exactly the same time. First reason. The second reason is the one you mentioned on the security of supply, because of course the new geopolitical context has made us all more conscious on the need to look at security of supply issues. These are on critical raw materials. We usually rely on one or a few countries. Value chains are complex in the sense that they are highly concentrated, and so for the buyer this poses important challenges. And so the new geopolitical context brought with it a particular attention to strategic value chains, and critical raw materials are clearly a strategic value chain. And the third reason, of course,
لهذه الأسباب لأن هناك أعمال واستثمارات وفرص استثمارية
So when we look at the increase in demand for these critical raw materials, you actually understand that the business case for these investments has increased, and actually as innovation also proceeds, as innovation also moves forward, there are new business opportunities from the exploration of these critical raw materials, from the extraction up to recycling. And the investment opportunity, of course, draws attention and makes policy makers more interested in critical raw materials as well.
Well, we've seen from the presentation earlier of Ms. Press that the markets are still small for these critical materials compared to fossil fuels, but that is about to change in the future, and probably that's the business case you're pointing to here. I would like to move on to the topic of supply chains here, which you mentioned also. Mr. Jahajana, how do you envisage the onshoring and the nearshoring that is taking place at the moment of supply chains to impact critical materials markets globally? Would this mitigate supply chain vulnerability for countries, or could this increase the overall cost of the transition?
Well, I think this is, we cannot avoid of it happened, but this is a challenge for Indonesia. To deliver better business environment so can compete to those who wants to move to onshore. So that one is the key elements that we have to deliver to the business community. But we believe as the country that is a bigger economy in Southeast Asia with many critical material available in the green, for the green energy in Indonesia, we can go through this kind of change in the future.
Ms. Magombo, if the developed world does not assist the developing world in building capacity, not only in critical materials extraction, but higher up the chain, the value chain, in refining, in processing, and manufacturing. Would this be a just and equitable transition from your point of view in Zimbabwe? And what sort of international cooperation are you seeking, or maybe you are expecting, on the front of developing some of your reserves, particularly the lithium reserves?
Thank you. I think the issue of moving up the value chain ladder of these critical materials is quite critical in terms of capacitating developing countries to have the capacity to absorb the new transition in terms of use of the renewable energy technologies. As a country, Zimbabwe, we do have lithium, like you said, but we also have cobalt, copper, nickel, rare earth materials, graphite. We have most of the critical materials which are needed to develop the renewable energy technologies. But we have been participating at the least level of the value chain without any proper value addition, which is critical to develop capacity for us as countries to be able to buy and have the capacity to increase the amount of renewables in our energy mix. So as a country, Zimbabwe has made a deliberate position to say any new mines coming up, and lithium production in particular, and even with regards to nickel, there has to be some minimum level of value addition done for the, at least to develop from just mining and exporting the raw ore, which is what used to happen. From last year, we stopped that, and we are now saying you have to do some value addition. First, do at least a concentrate, and with the view of moving further up the value ladder to maybe the actual lithium salts, so that we are able to get more value for the minerals. And that way, we would want to appeal to the international community to say, we know you have the intellectual property for the technologies as presented in the presentation by Elizabeth, but we would like to see you moving some of these value addition processes to source so that you capacitate the countries to be able to be part of the transition. That way the transition will be just. Without us getting more value from these critical materials, the transition will never be just, because we will continue not being able to afford the technologies which we need to accelerate access. When we talk about transition in some of our countries, it's not about transitioning for fossil fuel to renewables, but transition from traditional fuels, almost in the first industrial revolution, to modern energy, which is quite critical to ensure that no one and no nation is left behind. So we need that partnership, and we're happy that this conversation is happening today, because that way, if we have the same issues which are dealing with fossil fuels, you will have the likes of OPEC. We should have similar institutions within the critical materials, which will allow for avoiding some of the issues in terms of the geopolitical supply risk which we identified. Yeah, so we are proposing that we have some of these bodies where you look at countries like DRC being able to have more responsible mining, and that's the same thing which we are doing in our country. Value addition of these critical materials so that we create the capacity to also be able to fund our own development, especially moving up the energy ladder. It's very critical, and we believe that participation in this fora and also calling on potential partners to partner with us to do that is critical for us as a country to move forward.
Well, Ms. Magombo, I was trying to tell you that was the OPEC-style organization for critical materials is a proposal actually put on the table by Indonesia, I believe, recently as well. the establishment of an OPEC-style organization for certain battery materials, including nickel, cobalt, and manganese. Mr. Chahajana, how do you envisage such an organization impacting markets from the perspectives of both consumers and producers?
Yes, we do believe that cooperations among the countries who have the deposit can utilize in more efficient and also more good in the business practice, because they can exchange their views, their experience to do a well mining practices and then processing from the well up to the end of products in the supply chains. So this one is actually very important to exchange views and also technology and also cooperations among all those countries.
Some will say also price stability in market for investors as well. Ms. Govia, if critical material supply is not addressed adequately, would this endanger the rate and maybe the fate of renewable energy deployments globally? And maybe you want to share your experience here in Portugal when you're approaching the development of your lithium reserves.
Yes, thank you very much. This intervention from Zimbabwe is indeed very important, because if we want to do climate transition, we need to ensure that we leave no one behind within countries, across countries. So it's a very important point. And actually, the European Union has been developing what is called the Critical Raw Materials Act. Actually, the document is from March this year, which points indeed to your first comment on how this topic is now ranking high in the agenda. And this Critical Raw Materials Act is important. First, because it provides us with a coherent framework, because it provides regulatory stability, because it looks at incentives, but also because it makes sure, or tries to make sure, that you have a fair transition, including countries where extraction takes place outside the EU. So the Critical Raw Materials Act intends or has some EU extraction goals, but of course there is no way that you can do it on your own. You will always depend on third countries. So in the Act you have, of course, the assumption that you will continue to import. What you want to do is first to diversify, and second, to ensure that you do not rely too much on a single country. That being said, the idea, of course, is to continue to partner with third countries outside the EU. Actually, the Act has three main initiatives. One, to identify strategic projects within the European Union, but also with third countries, and focus on the development of those strategic projects. The second is to create a critical raw materials club outside the EU, to make sure that you have a framework that allows you to have stability, predictability in these value chains. And the third initiative is to create certification schemes concerning the sustainability of the materials that are placed in the EU. So there is this thought that you cannot do it alone, that's clear, but also that you should do it in a way that promotes the development of all the countries that participate in the process. As you rightly mentioned, this is a very important topic in Portugal as well. We have Europe's largest lithium reserves, and we are looking indeed at the extraction of those lithium reserves. And of course, this comes also at a cost to local populations. We cannot pretend that the extraction of these raw materials doesn't impact local populations and that doesn't impact the places where extraction takes place. And so the point that Zimbabwe made on the need to make sure that you move up the value chain, that you integrate more value, and that value is that returned to those local communities is very important, and it needs to be returned to those local communities as early as possible in the process. This is key. This is something that we are looking very closely in Portugal, because of course there is some resistance of those local populations. The second point that is of course related to this is to involve local communities in these processes. They have a word to say, and actually, of course, some of these projects create jobs locally. That's clear, but it's very important that you engage on a dialogue as soon as possible, presenting the pros and presenting the cons of extraction, so that you bring populations into the process, so that you compensate what you need to compensate, and that then those populations also see the return of the extraction that is critical, not only for those territories, is critical for Portugal, is critical for the EU, and is critically globally.
Ms. Magombo, the transition to renewables will necessitate a deeper electrification of the economy. Correct me if I'm wrong, the national electricity access rate in Zimbabwe is it 40% currently?
It's about 60%.
60%. But we're talking about 80% of the rural population with no access to electricity yet. And despite this, Zimbabwe wants to expand renewables to around 26% of power supply by 2030. Is increasing access and raising the share of renewables two targets that are easily compatible in your situation? How do you balance this socio-economic question?
Thank you for that. I think what is important is that as a country, we have developed a renewable energy policy. And from that policy, that's where the targets which you are picking up are coming from. With 60% of the population having access and the 40% mainly in rural communities which doesn't have the access, we are looking at increasing access rapidly using distributed renewable energy systems. And we believe that presents a critical opportunity for us. That's why the issue of moving up the value chain, capacitating the same rural communities which have this resource. And I think the intervention from Portugal was quite critical, because when you are creating that value chain, you are also creating jobs, you are creating value for the communities in terms of compensation and also corporate social responsibility, which comes with that. And when you have capacitated them with renewables, you can then accelerate the uptake through the different systems. We have a plan for up to 2040, where we expect to do more renewables. When we talk about 26%, we are excluding large hydro. We are looking at solar and wind as the additional capacity which we are bringing in. But we believe that with the large hydro, we have a number of projects which are coming up. We have the Batoka Gorge project, which will give us about 1,200 megawatts shared between us and Zambia. It's a 2,400 megawatt project. We are also looking at developing other hydro resources along the Zambezi River Basin as we go towards and collaborating with Mozambique to increase that import in terms of the green power from large hydro. We believe that with the renewables, the distributed systems, we will develop them in such a way that as the grid continues to extend, they will have the capacity to also connect the mini grids onto the main grid, and hence the need for proper standards being followed as we do the mini grids, which we've already started doing, not just as government of Zimbabwe through our Rural Electrification Agency, but also through cooperating partners which have come up to do. And the other issue which I would like to bring in is the fact that as we're increasing this access in renewable energy communities, we are targeting productive use of the energy, where we are creating production clusters where renewable energy will then empower the either increased irrigation and food production to improve the food security through irrigation system using solar pumping, or value chain processing of agro-foods from milling, drying, and increasing value of those products. So the issue of critical minerals, where we want to move up the value chain, we are using the same concept on electrification of rural communities, where we identify the key productive processes in the areas and then funding the end-use infrastructure for them to be able to use renewable energy to then improve their productivity and also food security through those systems. So there is this link between the two, so that you encourage the capacity to consume and consume responsibly. And the idea is to make sure that we reduce the rural-urban migration, but also to ensure that these rural communities have sources of revenues which allow them to also move up the social economic development ladder. As a country, our vision is to be a middle-income society by 2030, and we believe by doing these interventions, we will be able to achieve that vision.
Speaking of moving up the value chain, Indonesia has banned nickel ore exports in 2020 in order to grow the domestic processing industry. Jakarta even contemplated levying taxes and on exports of intermediate nickel products, with the specific goal of encouraging the development of a full EV supply chain. Were these industrial policies, Mr. Jahanja, successful in contributing to the development of manufacturing and the processing industry domestically?
Thank you. Since we urge the business community not to export nickel in form of raw again, the business have give positive reactions and movement. Many companies now already start to build a nickel refinery in the country. And as you are probably aware, that Indonesia has become an exporting country just in form of ores for battery materials such as bauxite, nickel, copper for decades. Rapid development of EV with lithium and MC battery technology is really a promising challenge for Indonesia. So currently 5 companies are being heavily invested already in producing several nickel refineries. With total production from those 5 will achieve 240,000 tons nickel ready to manufacture further to active materials per annum. So this number is equivalent to 320 gigawatt hours EV battery capacity. Meanwhile, domestic demand for battery is projected to be just 12 gigawatt hours in 2030. With this capability to produce as many as those 5 companies' production capacity means that Indonesia is able to deliver approximately 18.5% of the world EV battery incremental demand if it is in 2035. So if we do not these actions, Indonesia will remain like used to be As a decade ago, we only become a witness that value added of material do not enjoy by the people and the country.
Thank you. Ms. Govia, Portugal currently gets a little bit less than 60% of its power from renewables. Correct me if I'm wrong here. That's true. You have a target to raise this to 80%, and this has been brought forward from 2030 to 2026. Some say the low-hanging fruits of renewable adoption are easily reaped when the share of renewables in the mix is low, but gets harder as this share gets higher. What are some of the challenges that Portugal is facing today that it did not face earlier in its adoption days? In other words, how did the challenges change with greater proliferation of renewables in Portugal?
Yeah, challenges change, and I will, of course, go into those challenges, but there is also a learning process, and there is also a set of regulation, of procedures within public administration that gets smoother as you move along. So there are things that get easier. Now, on the challenges, and these are, of course, the good challenges that one faces. So indeed, we aim to reach a share of 80% of renewables in electricity production already by 2026. So we anticipated these targets. And there are, I would say, three main challenges that we face when you reach this level of renewables. The first one is that you need to ensure security of supply. You need to ensure stability of the system that you achieve, of course, with mixing different renewable sources. So we have wind, we have solar, we have hydro combined, but in any case, this will not be enough as you raise the bar, and that's why also we are looking into storage and into a national storage strategy that allows you to make sure that the system is bulletproof, because of course this is the electricity system, so security is of course of utmost importance. The second element is the grid, the management of the grid, because with this increase in renewables, you also have an increase in demand, and so the very first thing you need to make sure is that your grid and the investments in the grid follow that pace, and usually they have to be done within a very short time frame. That poses challenges to the way you plan and you decide on those investments. Coupled with that, you have also to consider careful interconnections with neighbors. We just last week, we have agreed on an electricity interconnection with Morocco, our neighbor. We are also reinforcing the interconnections with Spain, our European neighbor. So interconnections have added importance in this context. Together, of course, with a more flexible, more dynamic approach to the way you manage the existing grid. So we no longer need to be as conservative as we were in the past, and we can indeed use new tools, digital tools that allow us to have a better optimization of the existing grid. The third challenge that we face is that as you add renewables to your system, the territorial impact, the impact on the communities is also larger because you have solar parks, you have wind farms and so on. So the way we are dealing with it in Portugal is twofold. First, for instance, on solar, we are now ensuring that you also have an increase on what is called decentralized production that has lower impacts, lower visual impacts, and at the same time have a more direct impact on consumers themselves. So there is a link, a more direct link. And also we are expanding our offshore, wind offshore capacity. We'll launch an auction still this year. We have 10 giga planned up to 2030. So you have to find ways that bring value to the existing system, but at the same time that lower the impact on the territory. And, well, in the cases where that impact exists anyway, you need to find ways to compensate local populations, and we have that embedded now in our law. So if you have a solar park in your municipality, you are entitled to a fixed amount that you can use then in the projects that you find are useful to the community. And on top of that, the promoter of the project has the obligation to share part of the electricity produced with the local community. And in that way, again, local communities see the link between the park that they have in their municipality and the lower electricity prices that they face. In this way, you make sure that at the local level and at the national level, the objectives are fully aligned.
It's that sense of ownership as well to nourish
precisely.
that. Yes. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for this panel discussions. Big thanks to my esteemed panelists for this informative discussion. I wish you all fruitful negotiations today and in the days ahead leading up to the COP28 here in the UAE later this year. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. El Tibi, for guiding this discussion. And let me also add many thanks to all the speakers for a very focused and comprehensive set of ideas. I now open the floor for interventions. I will give the floor to council members, followed by other members in attendance. The floor is open. I believe the first speaker that I am seeing is Spain. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. A very good morning to all. I would like to thank the Director General, the members of the Council. Many thanks for the excellent organization of the Council, as is customary. I would also like to say how interesting this panel and this report has been, especially given the importance of critical materials. With regards to COP28, I would like to devote a few words about how important, we all know how important this event is, perhaps one of the last opportunities we will have to reach the commitments we have all engaged on in reaching our 1.5 degree pathway and staying on that pathway and make sure that the peak of emissions is brought down. And we, I think, are still in time to do so. I would also like to say that the reduction of the use of fossil fuels, as the Director General said at the beginning, has to be heightened. We have to reduce the use of fossil fuels, especially in developing countries. So we hope with the engagement of all of us, we are going to be able to reach these goals. In the WETO, World Economic Transition Outlook, we see that there have to be thousands of gigawatts increased in terms of renewables. And we know that we have the report on the critical materials and how important they are in reaching our goals in stepping up our commitments. We need that the manufacturing of new technologies in processing critical materials is developed. And this is also part and parcel of our commitments. The social element also mustn't be overlooked, and we must find the fairest and the most just and equitable formulas, as was heard by our panel speakers, so that this also means that not only the producers but the consumers of critical materials be on a fair playing field. And in Spain, we have a roadmap that we have devised for Critical Raw Materials Act, which was mentioned in the panel discussion, and we are working with our counterparts in reaching the Critical Materials Act's proposals and articles in the coming years, and so that it ensures that the respective considerations are taken into account in human and social development and the economic side of things. This report and the includes a number of tools to overcome some of the social and economic risks at stake. And this includes diversification, as was pointed out earlier, as well as compensating all of the stakeholders and all of the communities involved so that there is a fair and equitable distribution of the benefits of processing critical materials. In exchange, there will be many benefits to be had, not only economically speaking, but also in many other ways. So thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the representative of Spain. And next, we have the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you on your election as the chair of the 25th session of the Council. And also, I'd like to thank all the high-level panelists for providing us with valuable and timely information on critical minerals. The Republic of Korea fully recognizes the importance of critical minerals for the renewables-based energy transition, as emphasized by the panel discussion today. The Korean government is closely monitoring the critical minerals market uncertainty, in particular such as an increase in demand for minerals driven by the clean energy transition and the supply chain disruptions caused by various geopolitical risks, including the war in Ukraine. The Korean government has been making efforts to address this market uncertainty by making special legislation on resources security and increasing resource development. More importantly, the Republic of Korea, as a leader in the semiconductor and secondary battery industries, is a major consumer of critical minerals, and accordingly we place a focus on establishing stable critical minerals supply chains by building private-public cooperation channels, strengthening bilateral cooperation with the major producers, and enhancing information sharing and joint investment with the leading countries. At the Davos Forum last January, the Korean President Yoon emphasized the need to strengthen the resilience of supply chains based on reciprocal solidarity. Korea is making dedicated efforts towards intergovernmental cooperation to secure the critical minerals supply chains by signing MOUs with major resource-rich countries such as Australia, Canada, Indonesia, Mongolia, and Vietnam. And Korea also takes part in the US-led Minerals Security Partnership. We would like to stress that international solidarity is crucial for establishing a robust critical minerals supply chains in order to maintain the momentum for the expansion of renewable energy. And we hope to have more opportunities for cooperation with IRENA member states regarding this issue. Thank you.
I now give the floor to Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very brief, 3 tweets. First of all, thank you very much for the focus on critical materials. We think it is really fundamental for the supply chains because these are subject to significant vulnerabilities. So we encourage IRENA to keep on focusing on these critical materials. Second point, from a domestic point of view, I would like to stress that Italy has a working group, a task force for critical raw materials. And from an international point of view, I think that this topic can be an asset of continuity between the current Japanese G7 presidency and the Italian G7 presidency next year. And we are particularly focused, as you are, on the African continent, a cooperation based as you said in the panel, on equal footing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Italy. I now give the floor to the representative from Egypt.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will give my speech in Arabic.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to congratulate you for presiding over the 25th Council. I would like to thank IRENA for its relentless efforts in order to spread the renewable energy applications. Regarding COP28, we are really glad that it will build upon COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh last November. That is why the report on critical materials has a significant importance, and I would like to draw your attention to Madam Elizabeth's presentation regarding the map of mines. Those mines are mostly in Asia and Europe. These two continents are endowed with technological advancement with regards to renewable energy and its technologies. You must agree with me that we should optimize the use of renewable energy, and this is underpinned by political stability and developmental stability in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the repercussions of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Within this framework, there is a huge role to be played by IRENA for the next period. There is an importance for research and development in order to find new resources in order to decrease dependence over critical materials. And this brings us back to the Industrial Revolution era, where there was an over-reliance on coal and copper. But with technological advancement and with the surge in research and development, there are new materials like the carbon and the plastic, and this has decreased the demand over these two elements. Within this framework, again, I would like to say that we are in dire need of acting on two levels. First, maximizing the value chain of critical materials that are available right now, and there is a need for technology transfer. There is also the role to be played by research and development in order to find new materials so as to decrease dependence over critical materials, in addition to maximizing the use of renewable energy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Egypt. Before I move on, just to remind delegations, if you're wishing to take the floor, if you could please indicate via mic. Also, if you could make your intervention as short and pointed as possible due to limitations in time. And I'll give the floor to the representative of Canada. You have the floor, sir. Madam.
No. Thank you, Chair. I would first like to thank IRENA for including this matter on the agenda and the informative presentations. Thank you as well to the panelists for their thoughtful contributions. Canada welcomes the release of the World Energy Transitions Outlook preview and looks forward to the release of the full report. We echo the message of urgency conveyed in the report and emphasis that the time for incremental changes has passed. We also welcome the inclusion of the 3 priority pillars presented in the report and take special note of the workforce pillar, as this critically important element does not get the attention it requires. While Canada can rely on a highly educated and skilled workforce, like other countries, it is facing significant democratic changes that need to be accounted for in the design and implementation of policies to transition Canada to a net zero electricity system by 2035 and a net zero economy by 2050. A significant number of Canadians are planned to retire and leave the workforce over the coming years, which could create capacity challenges in Canada's pursuit of its ambitious agenda. This situation is exacerbated with regard to the availability of skilled labor in light of an ongoing trend for young adults to pursue university degrees at the expense of trade schools and technical colleges. On critical materials, Canada is taking action to strengthen and consolidate its existing position as a strong, sustainable producer and global supplier of minerals, and to develop innovative technologies to expand to other critical materials, such as rare earth elements. The Government of Canada has undertaken several initiatives that are shaping the development of a strategic vision for Canada's critical materials industry. Canada is developing its supply chain capacity in a way that supports regional economic growth, creates a more inclusive and highly skilled workforce, and upholds and strengthens our leading environmental, social, and governance standards. Our experience particularly shows that we must ensure that value is added to the entire supply chain, including exploration, extraction, intermediate processing, advanced manufacturing, and recycling. Environmental protection and conservation, safe and responsible labor practices, and respect for the rights of Indigenous peoples are priorities. Canada commends IRENA's work on critical materials, including the collaborative framework and its publications. On areas of further research, Canada encourages IRENA to consider the following: the economic consequences of the high level of concentration in the source of critical materials is supply, notably in situations of supply chain disruptions and price volatility. Secondly, the potential impacts of innovative technologies and processes in the level of concentration of mineral production and processing. And finally, the potential environmental and social risks associated with increasing extraction and processing of critical materials in mineral-rich developing countries, as well as potential mitigating strategies. This would include adverse impacts on the health and livelihoods of local communities, human rights protections, social tensions, as well as the natural environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I now give the floor to the representative from Azerbaijan.
Dear Chair, Director General, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to represent Azerbaijan in the Council of IRENA and contribute to the high-level panel discussion dedicated to the COP28 on renewable-based energy transition and critical materials. Azerbaijan Republic pays significant attention to the energy transition, and renewable energy development has been contributing to this process. In 2021, national priorities for social economic development of the country till 2030 have been determined, and among 5 priorities, one is called a clean environment and country of green growth. Apart from this, the country has an ambitious target regarding the share of renewable in total electricity generation capacity, which is 30% by 2030, from current share of 17%. I would like to stress that issue of development of supply chain of critical material could have significant impact to the renewable-based energy transition in the country as well as the other countries in the future perspective. We believe that international cooperation could play a vital role in ensuring the sustainable development and supply of critical materials like cobalt, graphite, and nickel. By working together, countries can address the challenges associated with increasing demand for renewable energy materials and promote responsible and climate-friendly practices throughout the value chain. Our suggestion would consider the supply chain transparency. Cooperative approaches can promote transparency and traceability within the supply chain. This can help identify and mitigate any potential social, environment, and ethical issues associated with the extraction and processing of critical materials. Standardization and legislative framework, that's another point. International cooperation can establish common standards and regulations for the production, usage of critical materials. By harmonizing regulations, countries can ensure ethical sourcing, minimize climate impact, and promote responsible material extraction and processing practices. Financial support, of course, this is vital. International cooperation can support investments and provide financial support for the development of critical materials and resources. It can include multinational funding mechanisms, public-private partnership, or international financial institutions support for the exploration, infrastructure development in the countries with potential reserves. Exchange of information and experience, this is important as well. The sharing information and best practices among the countries can lead to more efficient and responsible resource management. Collaborative platforms, conferences, workshops can facilitate the exchange of information and exchange of knowledge, technological advancement, and innovative solutions for the sustainable usage and utilization of the critical materials. We can suggest that the contribution from IRENA in the development of respective cooperation platforms on supply chain transparency, launching standardization and legislative framework, and exchange of knowledge and experience could be considered. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the representative of Panama. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Director La Cámara, Your Excellencies. Sustainable energy is the basis for the development of a more competitive economy, where innovation at the service of planetary climate fosters greater ambitions to speed the global drive towards a balanced, just, and inclusive way of living. Aiming to have that balance is necessary to strengthen the regional coordination regarding the extraction and production processes. It's fundamental to assure that the extraction process does include the creation of added value of those minerals, preferably within the region where the resources are located. The new sustainable energy security needs a regional shift from technology users to technology producers as well, working in different kinds of energy geopolitics. If we are going to survive the climate crisis, a more competitive and peaceful environment is where the climate harmony lives in. Latin America and the Caribbean region is needing a deep analysis of the situation of critical minerals necessary for energy transition processes towards low-carbon energy system, taking into account the national circumstances of each member country, as well as the endowment of their productive factors and economic, social, and environmental impact that its exploitation entails. In this sense, we exhort IRENA to produce more studies like the one they presented today, focus on each region of the world. So we propose a special report on critical materials for Latin America so that we can understand better the needs that every country of Latin America, for example, is required to succeed in this topic of critical materials and ensure just and inclusive energy transitions to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. I now give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With much wider interaction of clean energy technologies, including the expansion of renewable energy deployment, we'll see the demand for critical mineral resources is growing rapidly to manufacture the related equipment, and the vulnerable supply chains possibly cause the supply shortages and price spikes. These supply chain vulnerabilities could make the energy transition slower and more costly, and could hamper efforts towards energy transition in each country. Now, we need to establish resilient supply chains of critical mineral resources in transparent and fair markets where appropriate competition is encouraged. Japan expects IRENA to share information on markets, technology, and ESG, and to continuously collect and share data on the demand and supply of critical minerals through activities like the collaborative framework. In order to save the use of critical minerals themselves, it's also important to promote recycling and reuse, as well as to develop alternative technologies that save their use. In order to support the innovation and technology development, it's beneficial to promote investment in R&D and to support innovators and startups in this field. Japan hopes IRENA will be a place to discuss these activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Chair. The available data is conclusive. Any transition away from fossil fuels depends on enough global supply of critical materials to meet future demand for clean energy technologies. As discussed today, we have an opportunity to learn from the past and build an economy that is just and inclusive. A rules-based market built on transparency and respect for human dignity is the fastest pathway to the investment needed to accelerate transitions. The United States has mobilized the entire federal government and the U.S. economy to fulfill its emissions reductions commitment since returning to the Paris Agreement through the diversification of critical mineral supply chains, starting with historic investments toward building domestic capacity. For example, the bipartisan infrastructure law funded $2.8 billion in grants for battery manufacturing in the United States. This funding went to companies that followed high ESG standards. It also helped offset costs associated with those that come with high standards, and in so doing, the grants also attracted private investment. One of our awardees received $200 million from the Department of Energy, and they were able to raise $1.24 billion of private investment in response. The pursuit of data is also a huge undertaking, but we cannot accelerate markets without it. As demonstrated by the presentation earlier, IRENA, in consultation with other multilateral institutions, can help lead the development of conventions for data collection and analysis that will attract investment to accelerate clean energy supply chains. This kind of transparency will help direct investment toward projects that uphold the highest environmental standards, strongest protections for workers, and clearest measures against corruption, yielding the best possible returns for investors. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the United Kingdom. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you to the Secretary General, the Secretariat, and the Chair for organising this really interesting session. We're excited in the UK to continue our leadership of the IRENA Critical Minerals Collaborations Framework alongside our partners, Peru. And we welcome the extensive work that IRENA's analytical resource has put in to explore critical minerals supply chains in more detail. Resilient and responsible critical mineral supply chains are vital to realise the potential of the energy transition. We will not limit warming to 1.5 degrees or below by 2050 without unimpeded global access to the critical minerals required for the clean energy technologies that will deliver climate and energy ambitions globally. Extracting, processing, and recycling of critical minerals opens up significant trade opportunities. The UK firmly believes that benefits from extraction, processing, recycling, and innovation should be felt by countries and local communities where the natural resources are extracted. We also believe that all parts of the supply chain should be governed by the highest ESG standards. We must work together to support the necessary uplift in critical mineral supplies, to ensure a smooth functioning market that is transparent, and to work on innovations and recycling to ensure we can deliver the technologies required for the clean energy transition, especially as the continuing impacts of climate change may affect future critical minerals supply chains through flooding and water scarcity. We therefore welcome the work of international bodies and groupings such as IRENA, the IEA, the G20, to encourage the international community to work together on this important agenda. The UK continues to set out its vision and approach to this global issue. On the 13th of March 2023, we released a refreshed delivery approach for the UK's first critical minerals strategy, which encourages the development of diverse, resilient and transparent global critical minerals supply chains. We'll continue to advocate for the adoption of the highest ESG standards across the international community. I conclude by saying the issues we're facing are global and we therefore must work together. We see IRENA as a key international partner and in the promotion of international collaboration on critical minerals alongside other international groupings, and we welcome IRENA's continued convening and leadership. Thank you.
Thank you to the UK. A reminder to delegations wishing to take the floor to please indicate by pressing the button. I now give the floor to France.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I will address the floor in French. Thank you to IRENA for that report on critical materials. This is work that has been ongoing for quite some time. It's essential, and we would like to join our colleagues in stressing the importance of further work on this particular aspect of the energy transition in order for us to have just a transition for workers and producers. We need to make sure that we, as has been said, can guarantee supply. The supply chain was affected by COVID, and so guaranteeing supply is essential. We have put into place an investment fund as well as other systems to protect our supply, and we are also using diplomacy in the field of commodities and working with our priority partner countries. Portugal has mentioned that the European Union has its own strategy on critical materials in place. The strategy is based on very similar tools as we use in France, and we're using the same tools as the EU in order to have the leveraging effect that we need, taking into account the importance that this issue is going to have in coming years. Thank you very much, Chair.
I thank the representative from France. Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking our panelists for the insightful deliberation of this important issue. Malaysia firmly believes that accelerating the deployment of renewable energy and electrifying key energy end users are crucial strategies in mitigating climate change and fostering sustainable energy transition. However, we acknowledge that there are significant challenges for countries in meeting the ambitious climate goals of the Paris Agreement, in which, among others, the annual additions of renewable energy power capacity must triple their current rate of deployment to reach more than 1,000 gigawatt, aligning with the objective of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This exponential growth necessitates a corresponding increase in the supply of critical materials, such as those used in the EV batteries and electricity grid. As rightly pointed out by members of the panelists, the interconnection between renewable-based energy transition and critical material supply chains has now become a focal point of international dialogue and diplomacy. Therefore, Malaysia believes that while countries embark on the energy transition journey, the scaling up and the production of critical materials is vital to meet increasing demand from renewable energy technologies. It is also important to ensure that the production and supply chain for critical material must not pose any trade and non-trade barriers to the relevant producer and adopter countries. However, to ensure a just and holistic sustainable transition, it is important for the adoption of sustainable and responsible mining practices, in which we also acknowledge the need for international cooperation to support the development of critical materials value chain and supply chain, fostering sustainable and equitable outcomes through knowledge sharing, technology transfer, and capacity building. In this regard, we envision member countries, together with IRENA, playing a pivotal role in the process by fostering collaboration among stakeholders, including commodity producers, industry, government, and civil society. Malaysia believes that we can contribute to the development of policies and strategies that promote the responsible sourcing, recycling, and fair distribution of critical materials. I thank you.
Thank the representative from Malaysia. And I'll give the floor to Singapore.
Thank you, Chair. As highlighted earlier, more focus on physical infrastructure is needed, including investments in grid over land and sea. In Southeast Asia, there are continued efforts towards an ASEAN power grid to enhance energy security and resilience. These regional grids can also help advance clean energy transitions, providing green energy deployment in source countries to meet domestic demand and allowing countries to demand for green energy to meet their decarbonization goals. To do so, more investments in regional interconnections over land and subsea cables and also energy storage system will be important. This means there is increased importance on the critical materials and the supply chains that are essential for these infrastructure and physical projects. In that light, we welcome IRENA's project, a report on critical materials, and we look forward to see how we can all work together to mitigate all the associated risks. Thank you.
Thank you, Singapore. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Gracias, señor Director General.
Thank you, Director General, distinguished members of IRENA's Council, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. Colombia is a country with a wide variety of minerals, many of which are strategic in order to bring about the industrial development associated with technological development. And our main challenge is faced by the national mining energy, responsible for declaring areas of strategic importance. It also defines the lines according to which the strategic minerals are identified for the country. These areas are extremely important for mineral extraction, and it's only through the ministries that permits can be given to extract these critical materials. And it's through international cooperation that we propose to limit the extraction of these minerals in Colombia and do so according to best practices to ensure energy transition and to put into place the necessary plans and strategies for us to implement the proper plans. For us to have a fair transition, we're introducing models in order to change our extractive economy to a productive economy and follow the guidelines of a circular economy in extraction. At the moment, our country faces similar challenges to others, and we need to have in place strategies in order to ensure that the extraction industry act in a responsible way. Therefore, it's important to define strategies in order to ensure effective management of critical materials, and this requires platforms of dialogue through which we can exchange best practices and collaborate in order to ensure fair energy transition. These studies carried out by our agency and other experts identify what the fundamental elements for our public policies in mineral extraction is to be and what the outlook for coming years is to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. If there are no further interventions, I now give the floor to the Director General to address the issues raised and provide overall reflections. Director General.
Two times, okay. I think all we have difficulties with the mic, so. First of all, I wish to thank the panel and all the delegation that has intervened in this rich debate. And allow me also to thank Elizabeth with his presentation and the people and the experts of IRENA that worked to present you these few slides. And I'm sure that this slide is already raising your willingness to see all the report as soon as possible. And I wish also to thank you for recognizing the leadership that the agency is having on this field. I think we have to be proud of it. If you think a little bit about the 2 years ago, we were discussing 3 years ago, where the IRENA was calling for triple the investment in renewables to stay in line with the Paris Agreement. We were quite alone on saying that. Now, the triple of investment of renewables is a common language. When we were thinking and talking about UN General Assembly has entitled us to work on the physical barrier that are hampering the deployment of renewable energy. So the structure, the legal environment, and other. So it's important now, and I say realizing going around and many meetings how your choice to concentrate in our work on the physical infrastructure, legal policy infrastructure, institutional capacity. Now we see that these are gaining space in the international community. And also when we talk about the work of today, the mineral, we established the collaborative framework on mineral rare earth, where we are still in the COVID. No? Now I think that everyone recognizes that this is an important or a key topic in the energy transition. And my point of view, this is what the leadership is for. And you have been able to set the agenda that others are now following. And we are proud to serve you on this. Concerning the report and the intervention, I will try to be very brief, also to respect also myself the 3 minutes. I think the first point that I wish to make is that what we have seen and in the slides and the discussion, that there is no reason to believe that if we properly manage the mineral, properly management means that we take care of the environment as of the social aspects. You know? And if we'll be able to manage this in the right way, the mineral will not be a barrier to the energy transition. Second, last point that I wish to make is that when we talk about just transition transition is moving from one place or to another place. So the transition is looking to a world that is coming, a new energy system. But if this transition should conclude with something that is just, this means that we have to involve everyone in this engagement. This means, and I want to be very frank with you, that we have to stop the predatory approach that we have been using in the international cooperation. Mineral resource in Africa should stay in Africa. We have to build there and facilitate it with the collaboration for having them also the capacity to process what they have in their own house. We have to be able with working on the transition to facilitate the building of the green industry in all parties where this is needed. This will allow us to decentralize all the supply chain, and this will be more resilience and more capacity to work together. So will be more resilience, but also more effectiveness. So on other suggestions that you gave to us, I have understood that you have created structure in your country. Please connect your structure with our center in Bonn so that we can exchange continuously experience on this. Naturally, as you requested, we continue to work on data collection, analysis, on all these aspects. Concerning regional analysis, I think this is also a very important point that has been raised. I think in the report, complete report, there would be a due attention to regional aspects, but we have to transfer this specific topic also in the way we are working for the energy regional transition outlook. So we need to have a chapter in this transition outlook that talk about mineral and talk about infrastructure needed for accelerating the energy system. Concerning standardization, naturally, we can try to understand how we can work on this on this aspect, and coming with sustainability criteria and other things that may help to have a common understanding on this. Naturally, the concentration that is the economic theory. So naturally, the perfect competition is the best way to manage the market. So the more actors we have into the market, the more the market will work effectively. But for doing this to happen, we have to facilitate all parts that the world that may contribute to this. And also ITEF, our energy transition accelerated financing, is ready to provide funds for building a structure that may elaborate the mineral earth in the developing country. So I also engage your companies of all countries to be part of this process. You can ask us to funding, and if the project is a project that is bankable, we can try to fund this project also. So we will not fund only pure renewable plant, but also the supply chain that is linked to it. And we are ready to work with on it. And we are ready to work with everyone that wants to work with this. I think that your leadership is clear because the agency that you lead is the global agency on energy transition. So thanks again, and we will try to have a good way to present this report. We are already discussing with the UN World for having this report, having the importance that it needs. Grazie. Thanks to you.
Thank you, Director General. I would also like to once again thank the panel members and Mr. Tibi for allowing a very fruitful discussion this afternoon. I invite the Council to take note of the insights and views provided by the Council. With this, we conclude our consideration of item 3 of the agenda. I would like to propose to the Council that we take up both agenda items